Up next, an exploration of key approaches to equip young people with digital and life skills that are in high demand in COVID-19 labor markets, sharing insights into technology-based solutions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Naria Lucia, and I lead digital inclusion and skills for employability at Microsoft Philanthropies. Around the world, 2020 has emerged as one of the most challenging periods in many of our lifetimes. In just a few months, the world has endured multiple challenges, including a pandemic that has made way to a global economic crisis. The figures are truly daunting: millions of people unemployed, furloughed, or otherwise impacted. And some of these jobs will certainly come back, but many won't. And even for workers whose jobs do return, these workers are returning to a really different economy, a more digital economy. Even before COVID-19, digital transformation was changing the way that we live, work, and learn. And now COVID has ignited and accelerated that transformation. In fact, based on our internal Microsoft analysis, if industries digitally transform at the maximum rate, we believe the labor market can potentially absorb 150 million new tech roles by 2025, roles in data, cloud, AI, software development, and cybersecurity. But even if we aren't talking about tech roles themselves, we believe that every job in the future will be a digital job, requiring not only digital literacy, but digital fluency. So it's without surprise that we believe one of the key steps to fostering a safe and successful economic recovery is expanded access to the digital skills needed for opportunities during and after the COVID crisis. And the key to a genuinely inclusive recovery will be programs, policies, and practices that provide easier access to digital skills for the people who are unreached or displaced by technology, the people that are also hardest hit by job losses during COVID, those with lower incomes, women, people from underrepresented ethnic and racial minority groups, and very, very importantly, young people who are just contemplating their first steps towards a sustainable livelihood. That's why Microsoft recently launched an initiative to help 25 million people globally, including young people, gain more digital skills for the COVID economy. But we know that the challenge ahead of us is not something that one company can solve alone. In order to activate that inclusive and equitable recovery, we need to work together in partnership by taking a multi stakeholder approach like ILO's Decent Jobs for Youth initiative, which Microsoft is proud to support. But while there are so many hurdles and so many obstacles facing us as we look to rebuild and recover in the post COVID world, at Microsoft, we're also feeling incredibly optimistic about the future. And that optimism stems from the young people who we've met around the world, people who are taking this moment of challenge to learn and shape a brighter future for themselves, for their families, and their communities. People like Grace, who grew up in the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya. In Kakuma, Grace developed critical digital skills, and now she's a digital skills trainer for the Connected Education Program launched by UNHCR, along with Microsoft's Tech for Social Impact program out of Philanthropies. Grace says, "My energy is always up, no matter how hard it seems." Or Yassine, a young man from France who didn't think he had the skills needed for a career in the IT field, but found the Microsoft AI School, which helped him to develop the programming background needed to propel him into data analytics. Yassine says, these digital skills open doors to an inclusive environment. If you have the skills, you can work. You are welcome. And for a young woman like Tiara from Chicago in the US, a woman who, through the support of a local NGO, IC Stars, developed new digital skills and technology skills. After these skills were developed, Tiara said, "Having these tech skills, I'm better prepared to go into any field or any job that I decide to. A big weight has been lifted off my shoulders." Yes, 2020 has been one of the most challenging times in our lifetimes. But amazing people like Grace and Yassine Tiara, they give us hope that together, this economic recovery can and should truly be equitable and inclusive. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Naria, for that great start of the session. My name is Victoria Alonsoperez. I am the founder of ChipSafer, that is a platform where we can monitor livestock remotely and autonomously. And I would like to welcome all of you to this panel on the future of work. And I have to say that for me, a big enabler in my career has been digital tools and digital skills. I have been passionate about space exploration since I was 4 years old. And I grew up in Uruguay, a country that used to have no aerospace industry. So obviously, space seemed like something very distant for me. But thanks to the internet, I could do research on my own, and I could, learn a lot about space exploration. And then my big break came when I applied for a scholarship for conference in an aerospace conference. And to my surprise, I won the scholarship. And thanks to going to that congress, I could meet a lot of students and young professionals that were also that had also passion for space and were working on cool projects, which I then could collaborate through connectivity and stayed connected with them. I then also got a job remotely. Then one thing led to another, and I started a company using space technology to impact one of my country's biggest industry, which is farming. Then being an entrepreneur, I had a team first in Uruguay, then a team in Brazil, and now a team in Singapore. And so we can work all together by working remotely. And this is something that as an entrepreneur, I always valued the ability to work remotely. And for me, talent is more important than location. And I see that a lot of companies in the world were going through a digital transformation. And now the COVID-19 really made a fast forward into that digital transformation. And this brings a lot of opportunities for young people that can work remotely on areas that they want, but maybe in their countries is not really developed, like it happened to me with aerospace. But still, the COVID-19 gave a lot of opportunities, but it also highlighted a lot of challenges. And it highlighted the inequality that there is between the people that is connected and the people that is not connected. And also the young people that have digital skills and the ones that don't. So we need to make sure that everybody has opportunities, but at the same time, we also need to make sure that there is enough jobs for those people that get trained in digital skills. And with that, I would like to open it to, I would like to start the open dialogue with our great panelists that we have today. We have Naria Santa Lucia, as you heard before from Microsoft. We have Sukti Dasgupta from International Labour Organization, Lemnek Tiller from Wayura, and Raresh Man from ISEC. And I would like to start with you, Raresh, first. COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on jobs globally, especially on youth. The recent ILO report on youth and COVID-19 showed that 1 in 6 young people stopped working after the onset of the coronavirus, while 3 out of 4 young students and youth combining study and work experienced school closures. So how have you and young people in your community felt these shocks on education and unemployment?
Thank you very much for that question, as well as for the introduction. To give a bit of a background story, my name is Raresh. I'm 23 years old. And what I like to say about myself is that I usually tell the story of the youngest person in the room. I think I'm the youngest here. And I'm representing a network of around 30,000 young people that are part of ISEC globally. We're currently present in 111 countries and territories. And since 1948, when we were founded, every year we've been mobilizing young people to be able to enter the workforce. What we do is we provide leadership development experiences through cross-cultural exchanges. Every year on a normal year since 2007, let's say till last year, we've provided a number of around 40,000 of opportunities for either work abroad or volunteering abroad for you. These are super important for these young people to develop the skills and the confidence that they need in order to enter the workforce, things that normal and formal education usually does not provide. However, you were saying 1 out of 6 people are out of work because of COVID-19. Well, looking at my organization and looking at organizations similar to ISAC, which are in the business of moving people around the world, cross-cultural kind of experiences, this number is way more exacerbated. So we're looking at 40,000 in a normal year, let's say 2018 compared to 2020, when we're looking at a number of just above 10,000 young people that have been mobilized around the world, and that prior to March, because we all know in March all the safety and all the public health concern posed by COVID-19 led to, of course, border closures that led to the impossibility of us providing this kind of opportunities. So that for us is a 67% decrease in our operation. That means 30,000 young people that we would normally help equip to enter the job market did not have this opportunity this year, right? 3 out of 4. So 40,000 compared to 30,000, that's 3 out of 4 people that we would normally give these opportunities did not have the chance this year because of the pandemic. And what I want to stress here, most importantly, is that the audience that we usually talk to as ISAC was already a quite fortunate audience. We would usually place young university students into placements abroad. However, the ones that are, as you said as well, affected the most in a very disproportionate way are the ones that are not necessarily in higher education or do not have necessarily the access to the opportunities that these students would have. So imagine if the already privileged are affected in such way, what happens to the ones that are not so privileged? And let's take an example of, I'm currently residing in Canada, but my home country is Romania. In Romania, we've got 3 million people, 3 million young people currently enrolled in formal education. Out of this 3 million people, 250,000 don't even have access to the internet. So moving classes online is never an option for them. They would not even be able to attend school. So while we're looking at organizations such as ISAC that usually try to bridge this gap, currently, unfortunately, in a very paradoxical way, organizations like ISAC are further enlarging this gap because all of opportunities are now restricted to the ones already privileged. And since we're all agreeing that in disproportionate ways, COVID-19 affected people across different social classes, borders, gender orientations, racial profiles, we will see that even the organizations that normally are contributing to reducing inequalities, right now we're finding ourselves in this bizarre situation of furthering inequalities by doing our job, which is quite unfortunate.
Sukti, Raresh has showed us a very tangible picture of the challenges facing young people today. Why does this matter? And what does the ILO recommend to prevent a lockdown generation of young people whose employment prospects risk being permanently scared by this crisis?
Thank you, Victoria, and thanks to Naria for the overview and Raresh for your perspective. Indeed, very, very telling. We all know that young people are always affected during crisis, but this time I must say it's really bad. It's far worse than it was in the past. And from our research, we see that youth are being affected in multiple ways. First and foremost, of course, they are losing their jobs or losing incomes. As Raresh has already said, we find 1 in 6, he's saying 3 in 4. So, I tend to think that certainly that's a possibility. Secondly, their education has been badly disrupted. Again, a point that both Naria and Raresh said, and as well as you, Victoria, mentioned. And we know that can have long-term impact as well. Thirdly, those young people who were going to enter the labor market this year are really in a flux. The future facing them is rather depressing. And the other thing is that all this is contributing to severe mental stress of youth. And therefore, the ILO has put out this term, the lockdown generation, meaning that this is a generation which really can face severe crisis unless action is taken. And for that, as was already mentioned by Naria, it is not possible for any organization, any single corporation to tackle it. We need to have collective action. We all need to come around this subject together. And that's what the Global Initiative for Decent Jobs for Youth also advocates. And from the ILO side, in terms of policies, I'll be very quick because there's very little time. I would point out to three major policy areas that are needed in terms of addressing the current situation. First and foremost, there has to be concerted government will, corporate will, everybody coming together around national employment policies and skills policies to support job retention, job creation, youth-led enterprises. We already know from the last crisis that if fiscal stimulus are withdrawn quickly, then the crisis can last even longer. So we think that it wouldn't be wise for many of the countries. All countries put in very good fiscal stimulus packages, but some are already thinking of withdrawing them. So I would, caution against that. Secondly, we know that on the job training, apprenticeship, all these can have long-term gains, and the policies need to be rallied around that. And finally, during the last crisis, the European Youth Guarantee has important lessons, even for developing countries which don't have that much fiscal space. The second area I would say is we need to protect young workers, for their incomes, their jobs, their health, regardless of the type of contract they have, because we know that many young people are in informal contracts or non-regular contracts, especially in the digital sector, in the platform economy, gig economy. So regardless of that, there has to be a concerted effort to protect youth because they are our future. And finally, promote social dialogue, including amongst youth. So you need to hear youth voices, bring them to the table, and now is the time for that. So let me stop here. And indeed, the situation is rather grave, and I wish I could be as optimistic as many others. But I feel unless we all come together, it's going to carry on for much longer.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. Coming together, it's very important in these complicated times. Lemnek, you have put your digital and technical skills to work to the benefit of some of the most disadvantaged communities in Colombia, the indigenous community of the Wayu, who have also been hit very hard by the pandemic. Tell us about your journey leveraging technological change to secure pathways to employment and poverty alleviation in the Wayu communities.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Lemnek Tiller, and it's a pleasure for me to be part in this panel and share with you a journey that digital skills to tangible technology-based solutions that are improving lives and livelihoods of the Wayu indigenous communities in Colombia. The journey started in 2016 when in a collaboration with 5 professionals, I founded Wayuda, a social enterprise seeking to improve the quality of life for communities in vulnerable situations. Closely aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, Wayuda strengthens the social fabric by collaborating the latest technologies with the ancestral knowledge. It's like a social fabric to address some of the most urgent challenges faced by the indigenous communities. The Wayu are the most numerous indigenous population in Colombia. They have been around since the year 400 BC. Located in La Guajira Peninsula, they live in a dry tropical forest and deserts. That due to the climate change get very little rainy, even rainy seasons. Not surprisingly, they face severe food shortage, premature deaths due to the malnutrition, precarious roads, infrastructure, and limited access to water resources. According to the Human Rights Watch, the impacts of the pandemic on tourism and trade are hampering livelihoods of many Wayu families. 9 of 10 people in La Guajira work in the informal economy, and working or studying remotely is not a realistic option in a region where only about 10% have access to the internet. That is why we have worked hand in hand with the communities to design and implement automated solar pumping systems. Since I am a mechatronic engineer, we design and we install bringing autonomy and safe access to water. Securing access to water has helped young and adults value to rethink the use of their time instead of working in the manual extraction of water. They can now pursue their entrepreneurial activities, advance their crops, and revitalize their source of income with positive impacts in the communities. This is an effort designed by youth, which has not only both purpose and job opportunities for us, but also to strengthen the quality of life for the YU and their chance of also acquiring a decent work.
That is great. And I would like to highlight what you said about working with the community. And that is very, very important, because many times we see solutions that they were created with the best intention, but then the user was not taking into account. So then when you go and you deploy the solution, it doesn't work. So I think that what you're doing is great, especially highlighting that point. And Naria, in the opening, you offered us a real picture of how digital skills can boost youth employability and transform a young woman's path into employment. What triggers success in the delivery of digital skills, and how can we scale up approaches that work?
Great, thank you, Victoria, and thank you to all the other panelists. And I've already, so many thoughts going through my mind. I think one of the keys to really kind of developing a comprehensive approach for digital skilling, especially during this time, is to take a three-part approach. And we tried to do this with the skills initiative that I mentioned at the top, where Microsoft, LinkedIn, and our colleague company GitHub too are looking to really help people with those digital skills. And the three components really is all underpinned by leveraging digital technology itself, right? So how can we think about all of accessing data, using that data to analyze what are the in-demand jobs now, what are slated to grow in the future, where are the needs, where are the gaps going to be? Thinking about digital platforms to then deliver that content to individuals who want to learn and engage. Maybe they aren't able to go to a institutional education system, but they can learn separately, or after in a post-secondary setting as well. And then finally, how can people signal that learning with a certification? Maybe it's a degree credential, but maybe it's just an online certification that they can then use to connect to future employment. So I think those are three of the hallmarks. But like Raresh was saying, like there are kind of within our own programs, as we look at them now, like what are the built-in disproportionate impacts? What are the unintended consequences that are going on? And I think one of the key things, underpinning even our skills initiative and a lot of the things that that we're discussing today is that point, Lemnik made about access to connectivity. So I think that is something that is really very important. Our president, Brad Smith of Microsoft, has, kind of gone on the record saying broadband needs to be like the new electricity. And it really does. Like there are so many parts of this world that remain unconnected. And without that broadband access, there's just going to be more and more opportunities to increase that equity gap. And then, wanted to just also touch on some of the policy priorities that Sukti was talking about, because I think the last piece, the skills for digital skills, the connectivity component, and the last piece is really like, especially for young people, the networking gap. Especially as young people are going to come out into this job market. And we've all seen the data and research too, that individuals who start to try their kind of dip their toe in entering the labor market in times of recession, that their lifetime earnings are depressed overall. How can we make sure that that pathway is as smooth as possible, especially for maybe individuals who haven't had their real work experience yet? So let's try to think through these government policy, government stimulus, funds that are being put out there. Can we make sure that we include funding for young workers who are making that transition, making it more palatable and interesting for employers to hire them, giving incentives for that process? Because without kind of that boost, I think that there is a big potential for that this generation to really be left behind, and then there's going to be a lot of those social impacts down the road. So, I just want to just second all of those things that the speakers have already been mentioning. Definitely using digital platforms, but understanding the limitations of that as well.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think that you touched on the point of funding and incentives, which are extremely important for everyone, but also for innovation. I mean, as Lemnek was saying, creating innovation in your community, that we need to enable that through funding and incentives too. And Lemnek, I would like to go back to you. How can we boost the uptake and provision of digital skills for young people in order to spur innovation for sustainable development?
Okay, well, COVID-19 has put our economy model to test. The latest recorded unemployment figures suggest a vast increase to 24.7% in the 13 cities and metropolitan areas, along with a massive fall in GDP in Colombia. Young people must be a key actors in the recovery process. Digital skills do indeed offer a pathway for youth to bring their energy, creativity, and innovations into an inclusive response to the crisis. In my view, there are two key elements that trigger success in ensuring the uptake of digital skills and their translation into economic growth and decent work. First, balance the generation of profits and the social impacts of our work. We call for social enterprises, but also employees committed with sustainable development. We believe we can lead by example, and in our journey with Wayuda, we have mobilized over 300 young and brilliant students who have brought their skills, digital and technical, to support those most in need. In fact, those communities are in a department, in a region far away from where I live, where we act. Second, public and private collaboration to support the ideas and innovation from youth. Challenge funds and seed capital can help us to change the world. I invite all the young people join us today to take risk and compete in its funding opportunities. Each day is an opportunity to seek a new innovation in our projects. You must know that social justice is not lost, and many young people like me enjoy and are passionate about work towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals.
You mentioned the social enterprises, and that is very, very key in all this. I believe that in the future, all businesses will have to have an impact, either social or environmentally. I mean, we are at a point in time in which we need to start having a lot more social enterprises, and impact needs to be put into the equation, not just revenue. So it's very important what you were saying. Raresh, ISEC, the organization that you work for, seeks to facilitate the school-to-work transition of young people. What role do digital skills play in your service, and how? In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, are employers onboarding young people into work-based learning opportunities?
Right, thank you very much for that question. Definitely not an easy to answer question, but I will try to do my best. So the answer would be a yes and no for the later part regarding the employees. And let me give you a bit of a context. So something that we've already been talking about in ISEC quite a lot this year as a youth-led organization is the concept of peak youth. If you're not familiar with this concept, is a quite interesting landmark. And it means that right now, right around this decade, the young population of the earth is starting to plateau. So right now we're the highest young population that we ever had. What that means is that the job market was already quite saturated. It was already very hard for young people to enter the market. There was already not enough jobs for everybody. That being also going parallel with things such as artificial intelligence, automation, and all the things going around, it was already something very, very challenging for young people to enter the workforce. So this was a very unfortunate time for the pandemic to happen. I don't think there's any fortunate time a pandemic could happen, but this particularly was a very bad one. Because it put so many people out of jobs. And what we've seen at ISAC is that although the picture is not the brightest, there's also a couple of good, let's say, good things that came out of us adapting to the digital world. I'm going to give an example of our events. For example, in ISAC, every year we do global events for young people in which they can interact with possible employees, they can get skilled up, as you said, digital skills or other skills. And these usually happen physically. We pick one country. Every year we rotate, a couple of hundred people can come, the ones that can afford traveling, the ones that can get the visa to get there, a lot of obstacles in a way, which this year we've seen that going digital, it allowed us to make the event totally free and totally accessible for everybody around the world. So from 800 people we had involved in this events last year, we've got more than 20,000 this year, which is quite a big jump for us. And the let's say silver lining for us comes from the fact that also a lot of our partners, our corporate partners especially, have come on board with us for these events, and also with the idea of providing digital opportunities for non-formal educational learning for youth. So many of them are looking at, together with us right now, it's one of our innovation projects to look at how can we still facilitate cross-cultural experiences while working from home remotely. And a couple of our, as I said, corporate partners have jumped on board and are already willing to provide this kind of opportunities for youth, which is great. However, I said yes and no, because going back to the concept of PQ, there's already so many people that need this. And we've seen that in very disproportionate ways, only some of our partners are ready to jump on board this kind of initiatives. And for fair reasons. We're looking at the corporate partners, right? The ones that have already maybe had experience working with remote teams, have the logistics necessary, they have the talent necessary and the skills within their teams in order to provide this kind of opportunities. The ones left behind are who? Are non-corporate partners, are SMEs, a couple of startups, social enterprises that do not have enough funding. So again, we're looking at a more unequal market for young people, as well as for the providers to also seek the talent that they need for their current projects or their current HR needs. We're looking at the big companies again being more able to get the talent needed and provide opportunities, while the other ones are left behind. So it's a yes and no. At the same time, regarding the digital skills, some of our partners, which I'm very happy for, jumped on board for this initiatives, even more than just providing the internships. And we've had a couple of organizations that together with us created online courses or mobile apps exactly for the digitalization of to help this process of digital skills. But again, these are again available for the ones who already have a basic skill, a basic level of understanding of the digital environment, as well as the access to internet, the access to mobile phones, the access to connectivity, which unfortunately is not the case for everybody. So I'm going back to the not so bright picture with a bit of a silver lining there, that it can turn positive in some ways.
I have to say that I went to some ISEC meetings in Montevideo, Uruguay, and I thought that they were great when I was in college. And one thing that you said that is very interesting is that a lot of events that maybe people couldn't go before because you had to be physically there, and because they had a fee. Now that they are remote, the good thing is that they are free. So more people can attend, and the networking, even though it's digital, it's not the exact same, but still a lot of people are having the possibility to attend events that otherwise they couldn't because they had to fly to a place. So I think that's a good positive thing. Naria, let's talk about Microsoft's commitment to decent jobs for youth on digital skills and youth in fragile situations. What progress has been achieved so far, and what lessons can you share with other organizations and practitioners equipping young people with digital skills in today's world of work?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I just wanted to do a kind of underlining too about all of these opportunities. I think because we are moving into this digital virtual space. So if there are any young people who are listening, the call to action here is to take advantage of it. It's kind of like a low barrier to entry to dial in, listen to kind of what the dialogue is, even with UNGA itself as well. I think that there's so many opportunities. So, please take advantage, do that networking, and maybe it may feel unnatural at first, but I think this is an opportunity that, kind of the lemonades out of lemons kind of moment here. So just great points. I do think that in the pre-COVID world, we had a lot of really great programming through our nonprofit partners, because of course, that's how we always do our work, to provide digital skilling, skilling around productivity and computing. One of the main focus areas that we've kind of had to work through, like all of you, is to pivot and help them move all of that stuff online. And so I think, acting with expediency, being quick, making sure that we have the support to provide has been really helpful, and a lesson that I think we can all glean and draw from. Another kind of concept I think that highlights this is our Learning Passport program that we have launched with UNICEF. And why this was kind of an interesting example is that, the Learning Passport was always envisioned and had been launched pre-COVID, and had been, specifically for youth in fragile communities, helping young children really learn and learn on the move. So whether they're moving from one space to another and in low connectivity or no connectivity zones, they could leverage a learning passport and the content on that to continue their education journey. That was always a great idea. It was for a specific group. And because of COVID, and because we kind of had that in place, we're now able to expand that program significantly. And now we're deploying in 10 different countries: Timor-Leste, Ukraine, Somalia, Jordan, among others. And then we're in conversations with 30 additional countries to take the education systems and bring this onto a low latency platform. So I think, again, doing the scan of what exists now, and instead of just saying, okay, we can't do this because of COVID is a barrier, to quickly innovate. Are there companies that can help you do that? Are there governments or public sector partners as well that can kind of take those programs and bring it into the virtual environment? And then maybe we can even hold on to this into the future. I'm envisioning one day, all of these conferences, all of these trainings will continue to be online, so that you don't have to just be there in person, or at least have a blended or asynchronous option as well.
Completely. I mean, I think that's now that that the digital conferences came, they're here to stay. We just became used to them, so we will still want to have them after. So I think that conference organizers will have to deal with how to do it with in person and digital at the same time. Sukti, many young people with digital skills have turned to the gig economy and digital platforms in the quest for employment. This has given rise to a global labor market for young workers, yet some of them have a lot of difficulty in asserting their rights, their labor rights. How can we ensure that the technology that allows work flexibility and inclusion can also protect young workers and improve their career projects?
Thank you, Victoria. And first of all, let me say that, it's been really interesting and heartening to listen to the speakers, to Naria about the initiatives from Microsoft Philanthropies, as well as Raris and Limerick, their initiatives in their capacities, which indeed, as Raris mentioned, are the silver lining on this COVID cloud, if I may say. But as has been mentioned again and again, indeed, one of the things that has been made very clear is that digital skills and digital jobs are the way forward, and they are here to stay. And that, as was already mentioned, having the right digital skills is going to be absolutely critical for all young people going forward. Now, having said that, it's also important to ensure that there are good digital jobs, not only basic digital jobs, but also good jobs that, young people can aspire towards. And one of the most important things that we notice in the context of future of work, and of course the COVID context as well, because that brings the intersection between the two, is that the digital sector is one of those sectors where young people are likely to be more and more employed, and it's going to throw up more and more jobs along with the green sector, the care sector, etc. So the digital economy is booming even now. And but as I said, we need to ensure that young people have jobs which are decent. And indeed, as you mentioned, there has been a huge increase in jobs in the platform economy and the gig economy, which do offer flexibility and a source of income to many young women and men, which is great. But sometimes, this can also create some problems, because the flexibility to a young woman to manage digital work at home along with family responsibilities can add, more burdens. But of course, that balance needs to be found. But when it comes to the platform and the gig economy, while it is a source of income for many young people, especially in the developing world, it is true also that it does not always offer the kind of job that is decent. And there is a lot that needs to be done around regulation around these kind of jobs, relating to wages in the platform economy, gig economy, relating to safety and health, relating to access to social security, because very few of these have actually any access to social security, fair terms of termination, for example, clearer terms of engagement in many cases. And finally, with the virtual sector, it becomes more difficult for many young people to organize, but not always so. So voice representation and organization of workers in the virtual space, workers in the gig economy, platform economy, is a challenge, but also something that's extremely important. So, these are some of the challenges, and some of the challenges around which policymakers are working. The ILO is also very active with their employees organization, workers organizations, and governments. And of course, with the corporate sector, are many partners to the global initiative, and Microsoft Philanthropies is one of our valued partners, as is ISEC and others. But there are opportunities which can be reaped, and again, the digital sector offers many opportunities which need to be matched with the right skills, but also investment to create the right jobs.
Sukti, thank you very much for your remarks. I think that what you were talking is very important. Now, with the digital economy, there is all of these jobs happening, but at the same time, we need the legislation to go with it, because there is a lot of young people that go for unpaid internships, or people that do not want to, taking advantage of the youth and knowing that they need to have some experience, asking for free work. And that should not happen. The skills should be paid too. And well, we're running out of time, unfortunately, because this was a great panel. But I would like to have 1 minute for each of you with some final remarks. And what would you tell the youth that are seeking a decent job? I would like to start with Naria.
Sure. And thank you, everyone. This has really been a great panel. I love that line, the COVID cloud, there's a silver lining. And I would, send that message out to young people right now that, yes, it seems like this is just, there is no kind of pathway forward, but, hold on to that silver lining. Get engaged in any kinds of activities or programs that you can during this time. Stay the course. I think that all of us, including especially young people, can really build these resiliency skills during this period, and that is going to be that quality and the value that will get us out of this crisis, but then also accelerate, all of the recovery in the future. So thank you again.
Lemnek.
Thank you so much. Well, I have to say that as a young entrepreneur living in this digital world and recognizing that our society is longing for direction, I invite young people to make a stop and reflect on how they use their time. It is key to create a value and to be selective on what we decide to learn. And so my advice is to all of you is to have hyper focus on your goals and explore what you truly want to do with your life. In those communities that I told you, the communications between they and our occidental world, it's a little bit hard to have, and they use their ancestral knowledge to elevate all those materials, and the woman of the communities dream where is the water, and the men start digging those deep wells. And that's at the point of my intervention. You have to dream about what is your future, and get advantage. This digital age has unlocked the barriers of knowledge, but now we need to learn how to manage it. So do your research, redefine your ideas, create value, be persistent, and never stop learning. Thank you so much.
All right.
Yes, I would have a lot of messages, but I'm going to keep it simple. So for the ones that you are in the position of being able to access those resources, it is now that the time to skill up and get your digital skills to the top level. And then if you're in the position to help others do the same, acknowledge that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected us in very disproportionate ways. So if you're in a position to help others scale up, do so. And we've seen that, for example, with the initiatives that we've talked about today. And then also acknowledging this kind of gap between the ways that people have been, and young people especially, have been affected by the pandemic, demand government, corporates, and multinational organizations to take action if you yourself cannot or do not have the means to do so. We've asked this year around 60,000 people at ISAC through a survey, what is the number one skill that they think is most important for the future of work? And the one that ranked the top is actually a soft skill. It's not a digital skill, but it is problem solving. And if there's a time to practice problem solving, for sure it is now. So that's my invitation. It is the time to practice your problem solving in many different aspects.
Last but not least, Sukti.
Well, my message would be that these are difficult times, but my message to young people is know your rights and make sure that your voice is raised through the avenues that you have at your disposal, including the digital avenues. You can influence policy and you can advocate for decent work for youth, especially the young colleagues with us on the panel. And you have a huge role and responsibility to play in ensuring that we recover better towards a more socially just and inclusive world as we get out of this crisis.
Thank you very much to Sukti, Raresh, Lemnek, and Naria. This has been such an exciting panel. I am sure that everybody watching would like to have a bit more, but we are out of time. So thank you very much. And thank you all of you watching. And I'm sure that all of our panelists would be available on social media or LinkedIn, or if you have any questions. So thank you very much to all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.